till my... I am Eve, Eurydice, and this is your place to keep up with the news and the changes in our cultural landscape from the point of view of conscious embodiment and the rise in feminine in an effort to balance our nature with our culture. Thank you for joining the Liberation Conversation. Follow the podcast and turn on notifications for new episodes. Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eve Eurydice, and today we're going to talk about the gifts of the post-reproductive woman, the liberation of transitioning from, let's say, nubility to maturity. Uh-huh. So my guest is Darcey Steinke. She's a friend, and she's also an amazingly talented writer. Darcey is the author of the memoir Easter Everywhere and 5 novels: Sister, Golden Hair, Milk, Jesus Saves, Suicide Blonde, and Up Through the Water. She has been, super translated and a fellow of this and that, and lots of awards and teaching positions and all that. And welcome to the show, Darcey.
Thanks for having me.
So the book...
Wait, let's just go back. It's like we've been friends for so long. Let's let the listeners know. 30 years?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure, 30 years. For definitely 30 years.
I think 30 years, yeah.
Yeah.
That's long.
That's great. Yeah, we met in New York City, where I belonged.
Yeah, we were both working for Spin Magazine.
Right, we were both.
We had a lot of friends.
Yeah, and we still do.
I was trying to tell a young person, like recently, how wonderful the parties were during that period. Like in the kind of early 90s, because those don't really exist the way they used. I mean, they don't exist now because of COVID, but even outside of COVID, you don't really have those like really cool big literary parties where you have writers and magazine writers. You don't really have those anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
It was a cool time that we came up in.
Yeah, it was. It was
lucky,
still
really lucky.
Very lucky. It was still like the whole like post-punk aesthetic, and the Guerrilla Girls were important. So I felt that the revolution was going on.
Yeah,
and the feminist revolution. So I think that that's coming back, but we had a period of relapses.
Yeah. I mean, it was just after the East Village, like David Warren Rovitz, right? It was like just like maybe 5 years after that, maybe. But it was also the heyday of magazines,
Yeah, true.
And that's over now. I mean, that's like everything's splintered, which is cool. It's probably better now, actually, frankly, for the world. But it was fun for us.
It was great. Yeah, it was great fun. I mean, I do have a dream of like a feminist version of Politico, where only women write in real time our understanding of what's happening in politics through the feminine, through like the embodied feminine.
Yeah.
So that would be great.
That's a great idea.
And your book that we're discussing today is titled Flash Count Diary, and it examines the stigma and the shame attached to female growing up, aging. So menopause, which Darcey sees as a channel through which new realms of life and growth are achieved, and it's kind of like a new frontier, both for our thinking about what it means to be a woman and for our experiencing of our womanhood, because it's the first time in our lives it's not the first time. It's the first time in our cognizant lives when we are free from our reproductive work, so we are free from the gender definitions. And I think that, when we're children, we have this false impression, at least in the West, that we're the same as the boys. And then we hit puberty, and it's like a huge cultural shock because we're seen differently as sexual objects, and we are kind of like expected and compelled to present ourselves as sex objects, and we have these new like breasts and butts and attributes that seem falsely empowering, they seem to give us power over like, men, let's say, or reproduction, but in fact they're like the hack, that patriarchy has to get us, back in our place. Whoa. And so I feel that the way that you discuss it, at least, it's exactly that, discarding like the reproductive self, we enter the time of like coalescence, right? Which is a time of balance, finally, where our body and our mind can like find an equilibrium, right? That was missing, through our whole like adult or sexual lives, and we can try to unite like our masculine and feminine selves, or our bodies and our minds, be allies to our bodies, in ways that when we are sexual objects and breeders, we just can't so easily. So I want to say like my first book was, as when I was like 21, 22, I wrote a book about this struggle between my body and my mind, the struggle between my body's erotic desire and like my mind's commitment to reason, and I just could not reconcile the fact that like every so often my body would make itself, unbearably known by wanting to be sexual when like my mind was busy, and I had better things to do, or so, and that really was resolved for me with menopause, that seesaw, like that kind of like vicious cycle, right? And also for me, menopause had the blessed effect of like relieving my migraines, my incessant, migraines. So, and I had always had like a version of like hot flashes and biochemical like explosions anyway in my body. So it didn't really, feel as painful, as some of what you're describing. And I was tired of like cycling interminably, so like it was just, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for it. Yeah. It just, it felt that I would finally be able to, be equal, be a feminist, let's say, because our mind is so, it's taught by the patriarchy, so it's inevitably like more masculine, and then we have this body that is 100% feminine and geared toward procreation, but we're not, told that in words,
right?
in the discourse, So that's a disconnect. Anyway, so that's all I kind of like have to say as a means of introduction. Okay. So tell us a little bit about your experience with it, what led you to write the book, and the responses to the book.
Yeah, well, let me first say a few things about the wonderful things that you just said, because I feel like I want to respond to that a little bit, right? So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. The one thing I do feel is I feel like to say that I've lost my reproductive, or that you and I together, right, have lost our reproductive function, I don't think it's completely true. Like maybe biologically we have, but I actually feel myself, I'm able to nurture different projects and different people in ways that I would never have anticipated when I had the full responsibilities of being a mother, like, right? Like in raising my daughter. So I feel like that's quite beautiful, actually. Like, I think actually, I don't think menopause ends mothering. I think it just expands it.
Yeah.
I think that's quite beautiful. And then also, that was one thing I wanted to say based on
it expands, sexuality for sure.
It's
like my whole life, sex came with a dread of like getting pregnant.
That's very, very beautiful. I mean, not to have to worry about getting pregnant is a really big thing. Nobody really, I have to say that I've like, you're the first person that's mentioned it. Like, nobody talks about it, I mean, maybe a few of the women I interviewed talked about it, but in the popular media, nobody talks about the actually that advantage, I mean, probably just because it's been so debased to something negative, And then the other thing I wanted to say is, like, in your earlier introduction, when you were saying, nubile to, I actually feel very like, maybe like I'm not traditionally nubile the way I was when I was 16, but in a way I feel very like I did when I was like 13, when I was before I menstruated, you know what I mean? I feel very connected to that, like that little girl that wanted to like save the seals, you know what I mean? She really wanted to help the world.
Me too.
Yeah, I feel very connected to that. So in a weird way, you're pre-pubescent. You go back to being pre-pubescent. Which I think is very powerful, right? Like I feel like you're reminded of how powerful that state was. Like, you were so anxious. I mean, I was very anxious to get my period and to become, join the female sexual world. But I think menopause reminds you of how powerful it was to be 12. You know what I mean? Like,
and how idealistic. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I think that's really true.
Yeah.
So I just,
and our mothers, like my grandma, when she hit menopause, she slept in separate beds from my grandma in the same room, but like forever after.
Wow.
And my mom, of course, was given a hysterectomy by her, gynecologist, because she had like the intermittent bleeding. And, I underwent a biopsy, which I regretted, of the uterus, because they're like, oh no, this is not normal. It must be cancer. So like I think what your book does, and that's why I recommend it so highly, is that it takes it out of the place of like illness or therapy or and brings it into the space of like health.
Yeah, exactly. I actually think that's really helpful to me to hear you say that, because I feel like that was part of why I did it, because I like, as I researched and talked to women and I myself went through it, I realized that menopause is not a disease. It doesn't need to be cured. I mean, each woman has to make her own choice as far as like what she wants to do about it, whether it's exercise, hormones, therapy, young lovers, whatever, but like, it's not like something to be cured really. So that was very strongly, as I started my book, I realized how messed up menopause was, like, at least in the American culture, it was like really treated in a way that was completely wrong. It's a natural female phase, just like puberty, just like birth. It's no different than these other female phases at all, but it's been stigmatized so incredibly, it's just kind of amazing in a way. I mean, I think it really shows the power of the patriarchy, the fact that it's been stigmatized so strongly, because I actually think that the idea of like the young sexual woman is very important to the patriarchy, but I also think that when we don't really, we like male attention still, but maybe we're not under the, the sort of the power grip of male attention, of finding fathers for our children, of being like loved in a certain way. I mean, we become really powerful when we're outside those things, right? So stigmatizing menopause is definitely a way to debase women who are coming into a very powerful period, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's when we can finally, fully access like our feminist power, because we don't, we don't have to be torn and rushed and trying to like juggle, motherhood with, catching up with the boys at all times in the competitive, like, corporate marketplace or whatever.
Exactly.
And like whatever examples we do have of women in power, notably have all been postmenopausal, like Madeleine Albright or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or like Indira Gandhi or like Thatcher or, Golda Meir, like I can't think, all of these women were, most of them like, that were either widows or mature women who had pretty much finished taking care of their children. Yeah.
Right.
So it's kind of ironic, I think that so many of us, at least in this moment in our culture, so many, resist the optics of aging, and I understand, it's not vanity. It's just that we see ourselves, through the male gaze. Like there is no right female gaze, so we don't know what to make of this like wrinkling face, in the mirror. So I think that a lot of women, will take advantage of everything that, of course, male dominated, like, medical, industrial complex basically offers, everything from like surgery and, lifts and shots and lots of hormonal therapy and like staying on the pill many years, falsely prolonging your period and all kinds of hacks.
Yeah, but I really wonder though if those, my feeling is, I'm not against, I just feel like women have been judged enough, like any way you want to do it is fine with me. But I do sometimes wonder if some of the strategies that have been employed really work. You know what I mean? Like, does it really work to get a facelift? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I think
it works. I've had friends, it works. For sure it works.
Works in what way?
Exactly. So does it change their lives in a way that's practical? No. They don't, let's say, mate with people who they wouldn't have otherwise, or or get jobs they wouldn't have otherwise. So it's simply about this idea in their own heads of who they are and feeling good about themselves. And again, that's where like the male gaze, which is all we see, the movies, the screen, like everything shows us looking beautiful in a very particular pre-programmed way, right? So.
But I guess if it makes them feel better, I would be for it, for them, you know what I mean? Because I feel like that's fine with me. But like, I guess I wonder sometimes, like, I sometimes think the strategies when we're sort of 45 and up, like, I sometimes wonder if some of the energies that are spent in preservation, could instead be spent in like expansion, or dilation, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just don't think preservation is necessarily the way to go,
I agree. Because it's an illusion or a delusion, you're not preserving anything but like the epidermis, basically. Yeah. And everything within is still doing its own, right. So, and I think that, it's ironic that it's really, the prison, like the jail cell of how we're seen, is not that different from the jail cell of like, what will people say that we, rebelled against, right? Like I grew up, you can't say this, what will people say about you? What will people think? And now it's like, how will people see me? In a way, we've like exchanged one for the other, but we can't get out of like the basic trope of this setup where we're the ones looked at, we're the ones on stage, right? We're the ones who have to perform. I don't know. I personally, I support it in my girlfriends because I want everyone to be happy, as you said. But when a woman who has been a role model, like Madonna, makes herself unrecognizable and plastic, I don't. I'm saddened, by it because of what it says to like millions of other women, like us.
I feel about it. I have to say, I don't know. I don't know anything about Kristen Wiig, but I adore Kristen Wiig. But
I know.
When she was on Saturday Night Live, and she started Night Live, I think she had some work done. I'm just like, no, not Kristen Wiig.
She was not funny anymore.
Well, and also I think she was very stiff. I don't know if it was Botox. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just really felt like...
No, she had a ton of work done. She was unrecognizable. I literally had to Google her. And also, she wasn't funny.
And also funny people, like also humor is so much based on aging and death and mortality and like... So, but I just want to agree with you, like Eurydice, because I feel like when I see Kristen Wiig or when I see Madonna, I don't feel empowered. I don't know, like, I mean, at one point I did feel empowered by seeing Madonna. Like, right? Like when she...
Oh, yeah. When we were young.
Younger,
oh, my God.
Yeah. She's naked all the time. She's great. Like, I mean, like...
The sex book.
He's amazing. Book, yeah. Like, yeah, but I don't feel empowered when I see Madonna now. I just feel kind of sad. I don't really feel like she's making I don't really feel like it's a great message for what the second half of life is like. Just to stay as close as you can, like physically, to the first half of life. I mean, in what way?
Especially, may I add, especially if you're hetero. I mean, especially if you're still, sexual with like the male gender, which then confirms 100%, it's about how you want the boys, to see you.
Yeah. But the thing is, what's more sexy? I mean, I've been with my partner now for a long time. So like, I don't have experience of that, like as far as like trying to attract people or whatever, and I do sympathize with that, but I also feel like what's sexy, like actually what's sexy is like authenticity, right? Do you think?
I mean, I'm sapiosexual, and I think the people who are attracted to me also are.
Yeah, so but people, your authenticity, right? Like it's not
like I think that I would like to think it's my intelligence.
Yeah, I think that's true. I would argue true of like sexuality in general. I mean, maybe there's like fake sex that's sort of based on like what someone saw in like a porn movie, and like it's all staged and fake. But in real life, like sexuality is based on that little energy of life, which you're going to have more if you're fully embodied in your body, if you've accepted who you are, if you're not like you know what I mean? Like that's what makes sex alive. I mean, that's what makes sex like numinous, is real. Is realness, it's not fakeness,
That's the ecstasy.
I mean, yeah.
Now we're getting into the metaphysical part of your book.
Yeah. But I'm confused about that too. I'm like, if your aim is to have good sex, I don't think that these strategies are that great for that either, So like,
it's not. It's all about. That's what I'm saying. It's about the screen. It's about our relationship with the screen. And for some women, definitely, there is the trauma of having, of divorce, where their husbands divorce them and then marry like younger, much younger women, and so they fall for that trap.
Yeah, I hear you.
Instead of like going through like the ritual of liberation, that they have just been given a great opportunity to like not serve the dude anymore.
I hear
they get into the contest, like the Miss America pageant mentality.
That's definitely hard. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's like, you've been hurt. It's just hard. It's like very, very hard. It makes me sad that women have to go through that, But that's a reality.
Yeah, that's well, but again, it's the movies and what we watch and what I mean, that's what we're exposed to. So anyway, I think that being open about the options and about the power that comes, like you are writing about, from just celebrating it and looking forward to it, and moving into the future with it instead of like resisting. That's what we gotta focus on. So to bring everyone along, because it's like millennia of being objects that we have to push against.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you think about it, though, like the years that you were fertile will be less than the years that you weren't fertile. You know what I mean? Like in a woman's life. Like maybe even if it even happened to you at 13 or 14, it's only about 30 years, right? And then hopefully hopefully we're going to live hopefully I'll live another 30 or 40 years, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's beautiful, kind of expanding time like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't like the idea that like that's our most important time, because it's like, it's just ridiculous. It's just like, it's not as long as the rest of our life. It's just one phase of our life.
Yeah.
And it's really just sexism that makes the culture tell us that it's the most important part of our life, right?
Yeah.
And once and once those years are over, then we're sidelined, which is just basically just bullshit. So yeah.
And also like the old trope of like, maiden, mother, crone. And it's like, wait, like when does mother become crone? Because that seems, that seems to be unclear. Yeah. So I think that.
I would be happy to be crone. I have a lot of friends. I have this one friend, this wonderful woman like Rachel Pollack. She's a trans woman, and she's really embraced the crone, so if like the crone is going to be like this incredible mystical place, I'll go there. Like I just am not interested in the idea of like the hat, like the sort of shell of a woman, the has-been woman. That's the thing that I'm not interested in. But like basically because I think it's kind of a lie, it's not even really a reality. I always remember when I read Germaine Greer's book, The Change, which is, Germaine Greer is so problematic because she won't accept, trans women, which is making me crazy. But that's the best book that I could find about the transition, about menopause. But at the end of it, she has this beautiful long passage about, she goes up in the woods with her dog, and she sort of says, like, when you see a woman and like an old woman and her dog, do not feel sorry for them. Oh, no. That is the highest. That is the highest place.
Yeah, that's right. I got them right here.
You get the old woman like walking, like with her dog. That is the highest spot. That is nothing to feel sorry about. Yeah. And I just love that so much because I'm like, she's so right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like let's bring that forward more, that idea, Yeah,
exactly. What else is freedom? Actually I had this conversation yesterday with a friend of mine, and he was like, describing a young woman in the consciousness community, and he was like, she's very free, she's always arguing for her sovereignty. And I was like, is she hot? And he said, yeah. I'm like, she's not free, babe. I'm like, is she married? Yeah. I'm like, okay, wrong.
Yeah.
You already, So the bondage, whether it's to your children or your, it's like the ultimate freedom is that. It's the woman, in the woods with her dog. Not accountable.
And also, who was on this before was like Gertrude Stein said, like a woman and her dog is a family.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's so beautiful too, right? That's so beautiful, right? And it's so true,
Yeah, I get chills because when I came to America and I was barely 15, I came from a very, very traditional Greek island, and my mom got married, of course, when she was a virgin, because my dad asked for her hand in marriage from her dad, who gave her, right? So like, for sure, her first night, like her honeymoon, was some sort of like what we would call now marital rape, because she didn't know anything about anything. She had never been taught about the facts of life. And she stayed with my dad her whole life, and so did my other female ancestors. So all I had seen was women like cooking and cleaning and serving and upholding the household. None of them worked in my family ever.
Yeah.
And actually first my dad inadvertently, because he didn't have a son, gave me this opening up, because he would always say, let's leave like the women and children behind, forget the women folk, come with me. So, because I was like smart, I guess, and I read early, he kind of allowed me to be like, a boy. I think you had a little bit of that too. But when I came to America, I was taken in, again, like what an amazingly happy, blessed accident. I was taken in by this woman who was a librarian, and she had a dog. She lived with her dog. She was divorced. She was in her 50s. She she had a grown daughter. Yeah.
She was free.
And there has never been, it was such a culture shock. And I thought, this is an option. Should just like throw the dirty clothes in the hamper and then throw them in the back of the car and drop them off at the cleaners. I was so like, great.
That's so great. Yeah, it's so great.
She like drink her scotch and smoke her cigarettes and just talk to me about philosophy.
That's great. But it makes so much sense though, because we live in a patriarchy that like those very profound like acts of freedom by women have been debased. That's the kind of woman that like would be really debased, right? Like she's all by herself. She can't get a man, and it's just like, it's really terrible that the main women that are the most free are debased, like, right? Like actually the last kind of woman that you want to be. I mean, I see it in my friends from high school. It's really hard. Like, I'm not in touch with them that much, but their main thing is self-preservation. Whether it's their bodies, they're obsessed with planking all the time, and like just really their bodies, the way they look, but they're mostly, except, they want to just stay at around 47. You know what I mean? Like, but this idea of like the freedom of the later stages is just, it's sad in a way because they come from a place that they haven't had many models, right? But it's completely foreign to them. Completely foreign to them, so yeah. I hear what you're...
Yeah. I mean, The Golden Girls was a nice show. Well, we had it, but we forgot it.
I know. But The Golden Girls, there's a lot of stuff on The Golden Girls there. There's a lot of fans of The Golden Girls. Yeah. Gay men also really love The Golden Girls.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to The Golden Girls, like friendship. I've actually been thinking a lot about friendship too, and how important friendship is, how important female friendships are.
Oh yeah, that's the whole like rise in feminine.
Friendships are so important, I mean, not that your romantic relationships aren't important too, but in a way, friendships, they have a stability and a depth that is quite profound. Yeah. I mean, we've known each other for 30 years, to think that you have that expanse of time that you've seen people change and grow, and you've sort of like been able to hold space for them, you've witnessed it in them. I mean, that's like really a profound thing.
Yeah. And also being loved unconditionally. I mean, how often can how can you get that in any other way? Like 90% of love in late capitalism is transactional,
Yeah.
So to actually have these, women friends who love you no matter what, whether you have money, you are in the middle, you're broke, whatever, they don't care what you look like. That's like real.
And support you through all your as you face. Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I mean, I also think like COVID is an interesting time to think about friendship, because like here we're still very much locked down and we're still wearing our masks, but taking a walk in Prospect Park with your friend with your mask on, that's the highlight of my week,
Yeah, that's what I do too. I walk on the beach with a mask with my friend.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the highlight of your week, and you just realize, you also realize that it's like, it's not really, I mean, not that I don't love like fancy dinner parties and all that, but in some ways it's a really good highlight. You know what I mean? Like it actually is sort of the center of life in a way, to talk to your old friend and to walk in, among trees, and to like hear her problems, and like you tell your problems and your struggles, and like there's something just extremely meaningful and beautiful about it,
Yeah, I agree. Plus you discover like new vocabulary, you can retell your narrative in ways that like you can't at a dinner party where you're competing for like attention or whatever. You have very short bits of time at the dinner.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah. So my mother's grandmother, my daughter is named after my mother, and my mother was named after her grandmother. Her grandmother was the village, midwife, but also herbalist, and she would cure everyone. So her husband was like the butcher, and everyone would come to her for like spells and herbs and teas. There was no doctor in the town. And, and so she exemplifies exactly what you're saying. I feel that with urbanization and the nuclear family, we lost that. But up until then, that natural progression that started maybe with the hunters-gatherers, like went on for thousands of years. Yeah.
Also before, I think it's definitely modern, like the nuclear family, but I also think it's technology. I mean, before, a lot of the reading that I did, I wasn't able to fit this in the book, but about early anthropologists going to communities, over and over again, it's like the same thing happens. Like somebody, like the person who's come to study the group says like, is this plant poisonous? And then somebody says, go ask the lady in the last hut.
Yeah.
And that's like the 95-year-old lady.
Right.
I mean, like before you could look stuff up on your computer, you needed a person, you know what I mean?
Oh no, my great grandma, what she died in her 100 and some years. No one is sure, but somewhere after 105. And so did my grandma Eurydice. She died at 107, I think.
Wow.
So but those are people who never left the place of their birth, right? I mean, the town where I was born still has the name and the location where it was named in Homer in the Iliad. So that continuity, allowed for this. But then in the 50s and 60s, everybody migrated and dispersed, and then since then, that kind of like continuity of wisdom has been broken.
Yeah, it has been broken. I mean, I think that's where you feel like when you go, I mean, I always was amazed when I first went to France. That was the first, you go to the pharmacy, right? And you're just like, oh my God, they have herbs. Like it hasn't been broken. Like actually their herbal knowledge and their medical knowledge, they realize it's one. You can get both things at the pharmacy, right? But for us, it's much, much different. I mean, for us, it's been just like, I mean, I think it's both. Sadly, that we had to come to America, then so much was lost. I mean, even not dumb things. I think they're important, but things like how to make good bread, you know what I mean, was lost. You know
oh yeah. Also, how to survive without refrigeration. Like all of her recipes were pre-refrigeration.
Yeah, but all these amazing like skills that the Europeans had were sort of lost. But also, I think that I don't know, the idea though that like the earth where you like came from was not negative. And I think a lot of Americans, I think because it was hard when we started out here and we came and we sort of like conquered the land, I think the idea of living with the environment is not such a thing that, like it might be in like other places in Europe, you know what I mean? I think it's more about, I mean, now we're getting back to that. We're getting back to foraging, to herbs. But I think the idea that your medicine might come right around from the area that you live. I mean, that's completely gone away. I mean, that's like,
Well, I think you do address that in your book, which is like the ultimate challenge of connecting, of wedding, of the weaving together like the ancient and the modern,
Right.
So taking all those lessons and bringing them in as part of like the rising feminine, while we bring in the gains that feminism, with its access to like male reason, right, has earned for us. The bringing together of those that seem like a dualist, like an antithesis, but they're not, finding the way where they connect and unite, I think, is the way to move forward, especially like in climate crisis time.
I agree with that. Yeah, no. I mean, also like seeing to see what's come before as far as scholarship goes and like the history of it. And then to sort of see where we're at now, and like, we're at a terrible time, but we're also at a kind of an amazing time where, like, a lot of the ways that people have been, they're looking at. I think people are looking at them more, and I'm hoping that menopause will be part of that. But they'll be part.
I think it is. I think menopause is like quarantine. It's like.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in the book. I think partly because people are like, but people are always really surprised. They're like, "What? Like you're saying this isn't the most terrible thing in the world?" Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of amazing. And to also my editor, I had this really wonderful editor, Sarah Crichton, who's just amazing editor. She's left FSG now. Now she's the head of like Houghton Mifflin. But she said that when she previewed the book for the sales reps, who are all, they're all, she said like there was maybe four. Well, they're all young men, right? Like, and she said it was like she had farted. You know what I mean? She said they were so they like could not talk about it. They were so uncomfortable. And I just thought that was so amazing that even right now, in 2020, you're going to have a group full of people that are so uncomfortable, because that's certainly not true of books about childbirth. I mean, maybe there's like some aspects of childbirth that people aren't interested in, but they're not going to be like grossed out by it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I still find that lots of, even feminists, but for sure the guys, are grossed out by the truth of like, awake and conscious, rite of passage, birth, like that's why also like birth has also been medicalized for so long, and we're told that we should make an appointment and plan our birth, right, and have the doctor like put us out, but the real birth, like, it's warrior, like, it's bloody and it's smelly and you're screaming and you're sweating and you're just like tearing your body up open.
You're completely out of control during
it's a huge like I think it's a huge rite of passage, and I think that menopause in a way is the same. It's on the other end, and it's equally like it's equally not quite shamed as presumed. We presume it, but there is no need to discuss it, and yet if we don't discuss it from the place of like empowerment, biological empowerment, like you were saying, with the passage into, granny wisdom, right? Then then we don't evolve.
Some doctors push women onto hormones without giving them another chance of just seeing what it's like without it. I mean, I definitely struggled. I definitely had sleeplessness, which is now I sleep fine. I definitely had a lot of hot flashes. Those have gone away. So it was hard and it was a struggle, but I'm through it now, and I did it without hormones, and I feel sort of great about it. I feel like I experienced, that's my other feeling, which I know is not a very popular feeling in America, because America is like, you have a symptom, take a pill, right? But my feeling is like, what menopause is in a way is it's like a graduate school for the body. You know what I mean? Like hot flashes, sleeplessness. There's a reason you're up at night. You're up at night so you can do a life evaluation, like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, you're up at, these symptoms are there. The body does not do things for no reason, right? So in some ways, these things that women think of as unpleasant, my experience of them were more like, this is like a wisdom graduate school, right? Yeah. It's very pleasant. It's terrible, but I learned a lot from it, Yeah. I learned a lot from going through all that. Like, I wouldn't be the person that I am right now if I had tried to shut it down with hormones, right? So like, I want to just say, it's a little bit proselytizing. So I want to say that for me, it was a good experience. Though, as I said, I talked to so many women. Everyone's experience is different. Yeah. Some women have so many hot flashes. They're so debilitating. They feel like they want to go on hormones, and they should. They should get help. I really don't want to say one thing or the other is wrong. Now they make.
Well, the other thing that we should touch upon is that it is a perk for the financially capable, right? So you do have to pay for whether it's bioidentical or whatever you're on. Like working class women have no access to it. Yeah,
the majority of not go on hormones.
For that reason, because it's you have to pay for it. And on the other hand, to play devil's advocate from a different point of view, I think that this kind of like chemical artificial insistence on like whatever youthful vitality or like prolonging of our productive years is robbing the next generation from like getting their turn. That's I think partly why we're stuck with like all these leaders in their 70s is that they get the shots. They're all pumped up with like the testosterone and the estrogen and the whatever they are pumped up with, and this is not like natural. I want to see people in their 40s.
They can make. Now we know enough about hormones that they're so much safer than they were in the 50s and the 60s. Like there still definitely is a link between taking hormones and breast cancer, but it's very, very small. You know what I mean? It's like, but there is still a link. I think it's important to remember that as well. Like, even though it's like just a couple percentage points. So we know so much more about them. And so it's a more viable option. But the thing that I guess ultimately, as a writer who wrote this book, who was sort of like, in some ways my book was like a book of, phenomenology about the menopausal body. I do have a philosophical problem with taking hormones in a way, because it's like it debases a process that's quite powerful and meaningful.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Like, and that's almost like symbolically, I think symbolically it debases that, which I think is a problem.
Yeah.
Individual women, like again, your choice should be your choice. But I do think
always,
like when we think about menopause and trying to move it toward a place of acceptance and joy, hormones is you're taking hormones are a problem in a way, right? Because they debase the passage.
I'd like to talk about perimenopause, which does remain even more mysterious than menopause, and which many women experience without realizing they experience. So they don't, they go to all kinds of other doctors, neurologists. They undergo a lot of testing for symptoms that range from vertigo to backaches to it's just kind of the range is so vast depending on every woman's body that it becomes really hard to predict and put in like a sentence. But perimenopause basically is a stage that can last like 5 years, I think, up to 5 years before menopause. So menopause officially is when you haven't had a menstrual cycle for a year, right? Yeah.
Right.
So what did you discover about perimenopause?
I don't really have a lot of memories about my own perimenopause, probably because of like you're saying, like nobody knows what the frig is going on. I mean, I do remember like crying a lot all of a sudden, like, and then having really weird periods, like heavy and then nothing.
That's definitely a tell.
Feeling like not like myself.
Yeah.
But I remember a lot of crying and a lot of anxiety. That's the thing I remember. Because I remember thinking I've had long relationship struggle with like depression and usually I don't have to be on antidepressants, but there are times where I just think for my mental health, it's important for me to jump on, and I always jump off as soon as I feel like able. But there was like a year in there where I jumped on because I can remember my GP just saying to me, like, you're just so miserable, like just jump. But I think that probably was perimenopause,
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard to know, like what.
I mean, I definitely felt it a little bit like my time of pregnancy, and I think it is an equivalent because our hormones are, like crashing and, then, soaring and then crashing. Yeah. So this thing,
totally.
if we don't give it space, seems like a form of insanity. I remember that too, that I felt like I can't think, I can't I'm writing because I'm always writing, but it's, there is no like agency. Where is my central organizational like functionality?
I feel really weird,
Yeah, it is weird.
I have to say that was nothing compared to actual, when I stopped like menstruating. I mean, that was another layer of like, then I knew like, okay, something has really changed, it wasn't just, I'm not denigrating perimenopause, but I'm saying for all the variance and confusion there, like when menopause hit me, I knew, like when you start having serious hot flashes, that's like, okay, something is happening for sure, like I knew for sure then.
Yeah.
But it's because now, I'm 58 now, and I'm kind of more on that. And I definitely am like, I run hotter. I have maybe I'll have some days where I'll have a couple hot flashes, but it's, like nothing compared to how it was. Like it's not as like, but I feel more stable now than I have for like 10 years or something, or 15 years.
Yeah.
I feel more settled. I still have all my mental health problems, you know what I mean? But as far as bodily, I feel very much like way more stable than I have for a really long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what I did, and I did it like, kind of like by instinct, but I didn't really do it knowingly. is take time off, which I also did. Well, when I was pregnant, I was hit by a car in the 3rd month, and I thought I feared losing the baby, so I consciously took to my bed. And at the time I was supposed to be on book tour, so kind of like changed everything. But this time around again, like I remember, giving myself that conscious permission to not be productive, and that helped me a lot, because my body was doing a lot of busy work within, and I didn't have a vocabulary for it, but that's okay. Like I could feel all the stuff going on.
No, it's so important. I mean, I just read this article in the Times about self-care during COVID, and this one woman, like this herbalist, was saying the main thing you need to do is expect less from yourself. And I felt that to be so fantastic, because like that's the hardest thing for me. Like, like I'm really hard on myself. I push myself really hard, but just expect less.
You do. You have that Puritan work ethic, my love, which I admire a lot.
But just expect less from yourself. But try to expect less from yourself. You know what I mean? It's okay to have a day where it's hard for me not to work every day, but it's okay where you work for an hour, you know what I mean? And then you walk around the park, and then you read a book of essays, and then you drink red wine, and then you watch a movie. Yeah. Like it's hard for me to feel good about myself, but also to feel like I have my life in control if I don't work a lot, But I want to work less. And I really, actually, some of the people that I've admired the most, the writers I've admired the most, have really encouraged me to work less. Actually, they always say, like, when you want to write, you'll know and you'll write. You don't have to be constantly writing. You know what I mean? Like you should just like enjoy the down times between projects. You should but it's very, very hard for me to do that.
Yeah. I mean, again, as I mentioned before, I'm always writing, like when you look at my desks right now, there are maybe 1,000 notes. But that's not like formal writing. That is the process that goes on, and I'm okay with letting that go on for a long time. Like stitching taught me that. Taking on embroidery taught me the slowness. Like a different time than like masculine time. So
totally.
I think that I'm still working on things that were percolating 30 years ago when we were single and friends.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't have any, that's legit. It's like the way you spoke about time before, which was like, so beautiful. And it's just so open, that openness of time that takes us out of like the productive time, that's measured.
I do think that's another part that's, I'm not sure if I can even access it, but like if we can access it, 50, like 60 and up, it could be a change like in our relationship to time, right? Like that time isn't something to consume and to like rule over and to achieve in, and because we're always talking about capitalist time. We're talking about that, great time, money, and all that, right? But there might be a way as we get older to like not have that same relationship time. And that seems to me, it's extremely challenging since I'm just such a driven person, but like, it seems also really, I'm fascinated by it. Like, I don't know if I can do it, but I want to, like, I want to have a more tender and gentle relationship to time. Like as I get older, like I want to do that,
Yeah. And I think that that's more natural to us. So when we speak of like our mental health, I find in myself, at least that when I feel like, when I start thinking, I have these thoughts of like failure and, self-hate and suicide, whatever, if I take myself out of my identity of like who I am in the world and I take a break, then those thoughts slowly dissipate. But that's because I've divorced myself from the expectations of the world that I've put myself in. And I tell myself, and I think that it helps being a foreigner and having like a home and a, citizenship on a little Greek island, that I always tell myself, I can always like go back there.
Yeah.
So it becomes an option. This this identity is what I choose.
That seems really powerful to me. Like that would be a cool. I don't know if I feel like I have that option. I mean, I always think I do have a little cottage upstate, and I think like which I it's very modest, but we own it free and clear. So I always think, okay, if things really drop out, we'll just go to this little place in the middle of nowhere. But I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to. I mean, I feel like this is one of the more confusing things to me about aging. Like, clearly, like I'll want to keep doing some projects, right? Like I want to continue to express what it's like to be me in the world, and like have ideas and stuff. But clearly, I also want to be in the world because I will only be in the world for so long, right? So I want to like see what that's like, feel what that's like to just be like not a writer in the world, but me in the world, right? But I'm also confused about like where will my self-worth come from? You know what I mean? Like if I mean it's I feel like that. I mean, those are to me the challenges of aging. Is like, I mean, eventually, right? You're probably not gonna. You still might be writing, but you're not gonna be writing books. Like, what's that gonna feel like in your whatever? I mean, I hope it won't happen for a long time. But how will you be a person in the world? Like without your literary projects and whatnot, like that seems to me.
Yeah,
that seems really interesting.
Huge and very interesting question, and I really think it's something to work on and think about and write about. Which is what is our self-worth in general, as women in this patriarchy and this culture that seems to like monetize and quantify everything more and more. Like what else is the internet if not quantifying and oversimplifying. I mean, for myself, I feel that I am a writer. I've been for many years identified as an artist, and that's wonderful, and I appreciate that, but not to myself. I am definitely a writer. I've written since I was like 2, basically. And I always will. I think I will till I die. That doesn't mean, however, that I understand what the value, there will be a huge body of work, which may or may not be of value and may or may not like go out in the world and be
I know. But okay too. I mean, maybe one of the end game things is to actually write for yourself.
Well, we're scribes, that's how I think that's how we process, no?
But I'm always thinking I am writing my own story and I'm writing out of my own self.
Yeah.
But I'm always writing thinking like I'm going to be communicating, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like not necessarily for like a public, but I will be communicating, So to think that there may be ways in which that's not happening. I mean, that's just been such a fundamental drive for me my whole life, that it's just interesting for me to think that like, how will that change, or will that change? Or, I mean, I always think that, when I started teaching, I was teaching continuing ed, when I was in my mid-20s. And I had this really amazing student. It was a difficult class though. Like it was a continuing ed class. It was mostly young women in their 20s who were like assistant editors of Vogue and things like that, like very fashionable. I remember there was a story in which a drunken fashion editor was coming home in the cab, and somehow she was so mad that she took her Agnes B jacket off and stuffed it under the bottom of the chair, and everybody in the class was like, no, like, everybody was so horrified, But among this group, there was this amazing woman. She was 85 and she was a Holocaust survivor, and she was trying to write this. I mean, and it was an amazing class because everyone kind of like, I worked hard to make sure everyone could embrace each other, and not be freaked out by each other. But she really wanted to tell her story, her story of being in the Holocaust, her story of being in the concentration camp. And I remember her frustration because she was getting older, her skill level was what it was. And she would put a lot of pressure on me in conferences. She kept saying to me, like, you do it, like, I'll pay you and you write this. And I would always say to her, I was young, but I knew enough to say, like, the point is not anyone else doing it but you. Like, the point is that you're going to try to figure out what this experience meant to you. You're going to make it as clear as you possibly can, as meaningful as you possibly can. And then after that, we'll figure out, like, and so what we ended up doing is, like, she got like 20 pages together, And then we had a reading with her family and her friends. And it was probably one of the best literary events I've ever been to. You know, it was very like deeply meaningful, right? Because she had actually accomplished, like, she didn't really need to publish a book. Like, she had accomplished what she set out to do, which was to let her kids who didn't really understand what she had gone through, right? Her friends from New York, right? Like, who didn't exactly understand her, right? She was able to explain some of her personal experience to them, like what she thought it was to be human. So I always keep that inside of me. You know, she was 85, and I always think to myself, okay, well, that's like, the goal is not really to publish. The goal is to write, but the goal is to sort of like communicate too. But the way you communicate can be varied. Like, it doesn't have to, it can be a podcast. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it can't,
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't necessarily have to be like a certain like book, you know what I mean? Like, but because that's like, the goal is bigger than that in a way, right? Like, the goal of writing, communication.
That's what I think too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an ongoing, you know, discourse. And by writing, we're part of it. And, you know, all we have to do is to self-publish or like do like EPUB or, you know, like, you know, your computer allows you to just throw it all out on the internet in a second. So it's there for those who look. But it is part of like a collective, you know, effort, a collective like engine toward evolution, you know, changing the language and the, you know. So I think that the more we all do it, the better. And,
Me too.
You know, it's not like my business to be in charge of, you know, who is like promoted and who sells better. And
I agree with that.
I'm glad that it's not my business.
Yeah, everything's moving. I kind of agree with that. I think everybody's writing is moving things forward in one way or another. I agree with that. I think that's true. I mean, the canon is based on how time moves forward, right? Like, and what's politically important going forward, right? So a lot of like the books, I think, I mean, somebody like Mailer, is Mailer going to make it out? I'm not sure, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, some of the books that people thought were the most important books, the most important writers, you know, times are changing, things are moving. Some writers had the foresight to write about things that people will be interested in still now. Some people don't, you know, it's like, that's the way the literary machine works, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And also, like, honestly, I think that right now we're going through a short-lived period, but nevertheless a short-lived period where like writing is affected by the digital experience of writing. And so a lot of like new writers confuse being a professional writer with being a creative writer. You know, to me, you know, a professional writer writes copy, you know, writes for speed, writes for clarity. You know, it's like the Medium posts, you know, write so that a fourth grader can understand you. Fine. That's not what I do. I'm not, you know, that's not what I do. I'm not interested in that at all. And that's okay if the production system doesn't pay me accordingly. You know, I know that I'm not that. What's creative writing to me is being part of an avant-garde, you know, of writing for the future, like writing ahead and writing things I haven't read, or, you know, trying to think in, you know, so creating forward, which is what, like, giving birth, which is what creating is. You know, you take like 9 months to make something that didn't exist. Right. So, you know, so I think that there is like a misrepresentation where like simplify, keep it like easy and clear. And you know, that's a little fad, and it will pass. But right now, I mean, we're a little in it.
I actually think that, like, I mean, who would know there'd be like this past week, there'd be like insurrection. I mean, thank God we had all the protests this summer, right, for Black Lives Matter, right? There's no way to know. I mean, hopefully history will move toward things that are liberal and more open, but like the kinds of voices that are magnified, you know what I mean? Like, it's like there's no way.
So I do want to say something about that.
Like, books, no way to know what books are going to make it out of history, right? Like,
right, exactly.
Even I would say, I mean, I love Shakespeare, but I think even Shakespeare, who knows? You know what I mean? Like, you don't really know what's going to actually, you know, like what will continue to be generative, like for the people that, you know, that come after.
I love Shakespeare, and he did write during the plague. So, you know, But
Yeah.
he's definitely an inspiration right now.
Yeah.
But I think that what we discovered during this, the storming of the Capitol, which, by the way, was when we were supposed to speak, and I was texting you in real time saying, if we wouldn't have done it, we can't.
Crazy.
We can't, democracy is at risk, the demos.
That's true.
But I have felt for a while now, since the election, since, in fact, Florida, where I'm based, voted Republican, and since I have spoken in depth with a lot of people in the spiritual and conscious communities who were like the inheritors of the hippies, who are like the burners, like the shaman dude who will only eat organic food, and somehow they went into Q, unknown through different, channels, and inevitably, are supporting the other side, which is, the plutocrats, that's
of course.
The Trump side. And I feel that we have gone too much in the side of reason, that, whether you want to say Democrats or our society in general, is erring on the side of reason at the expense of emotion, because a lot of these choices that these people who are now writing are making are 100% emotional. They're like from the gut, like faith, about which a lot and have written a lot about, being the daughter of a minister, right?
Right.
So I feel that, finding, giving voice to like the emotion, or, then the ritual aspect of, let's say, our side, of the progressive side, will help balance things out. I think that we've got a little too intellectual and, too committed to like identity, and words and definition, and the right words, and we've left behind this whole huge, population who, come from like the transcendental or the ecstatic, right? Traditions, and who feel about America the same way that they, feel about other, ideals, like higher human ideals, whether it's God or something else. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's like, it's a very confusing time to be an American, right? Like, So I also think that like, it was hard for me this summer because I was sort of like, what am I going to say that's going to be helpful? Like, I feel like there's so many, it's so much important. There's so many voices and so many writers. It's so important to people to be reading them and listening to them and talking to them. But then slowly in the fall, I was sort of like, I'm a writer. I'm going to write. I can definitely be more sensitive. I can try to be like more inclusive, but like, I'm still going to be trying to, tell stories and think and write and stuff. So like, I have to, there's no way around me continuing to do my work, but I found it very confusing this summer. I found like it to be like a time of like, hard to know. It's like the ground dropped out. Like, what do you, I think it must be the way that people feel when things change really quickly, which is both really exciting, but also kind of scary. I mean, I always had these fantasies of like, oh, if I was in the 60s, it would be amazing. But I think now we're really seeing what that would be like. I feel like, I used to think, oh, the transformation was very like people were cognizant it was happening, it was exciting. But now I feel like, no, it was a time like these times are like times of very fast transformation and transition. And they're disconcerting for like even the people that want that transition. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, like I do so desperately. I want to live in a more free and open and beautiful world, It's like, but I do find it just to be hard to get a hold, hard to figure out like who I am and what and where I fit in and what the world.
Well, I feel, and again, I don't have an answer, but I do have answer for myself and how I feel about it. And I feel that, we went with the system, way too much in a sense, and we still are, so I don't practice identity politics. I don't see color. So I'm done. That's it. Yeah. That's how it's been. That's how it's going to be. I don't see gender, unless it's like sexually reproductive functionality.
Yeah, right.
But I think that those struggles, have been taken advantage of. So even the matriarch that we were talking about, the matriarch in modern times just becomes like, it takes on the role of the guy, takes on the role of like the dead father, so to speak. So it doesn't matter whether she's a woman or a man, she's engaging in the defense of the system of the patriarchy, the generational inheritance systems, or, the wealth, the passing of the, wealth to the progeny, all that stuff.
Right.
So, it's like we're a game of like changing chairs, the musical chairs, where like, so we had a certain time, a white president, and then we had the president of color, and then we had an orange president, I don't know, and then we had, one female justice, pass, and she was replaced by another female justice, right? So I feel that like these optics are self-defeating. And I feel that, if we stay in the same system and don't change, the system fundamentally, then we can't move forward. We're just changing. It's like, the Soviet Union. So like the Tsar fell, and then like Lenin, and then Stalin was the new Tsar, so they were not communists. This was not what Marx wrote about, but they said they were.
There has to be more fundamental change. No, I agree with that.
Yeah, so there hasn't been like a fundamental change. It's all kind of like, we want your job. I want to be like on the board of directors because I'm a girl, or I'm olive skinned. But not wanting that is where, to me, the step forward begins.
Right. Yeah.
Like saying, changing that whole.
I agree. Like, you don't want the same things that they wanted, or the places that they, like, you don't want the same things they wanted. You want to actually form the whole deal. We both came up in a very male world, and we actually, I sometimes feel bad about how much I like acquiesced to that male world.
Yeah, me too. I did.
And also how much I was like, oh, George Plimpton, instead of being just like, this is ridiculous, like, I sort of like, I wanted to be in the world. And so, I mean, I didn't do anything that I'm ashamed of, like, but I did in small ways do things I was ashamed of. I feel like I wish I had stood up more for the kind of world that I wanted, rather than like, and I have a certain amount of guilt about that, and a certain amount of anger that, like, I feel I was forced to do that. I was forced to sort of like, I mean, maybe it's not true I was forced. Maybe some people held themselves away from it. But like, I was sort of forced to acculturate myself into this male literary world. And I feel grumpy about it sometimes. Like, I feel ways. I feel shame sometimes about it. I feel angry that I feel like I had to do it. I feel like I always knew it was bullshit. Why didn't I just come out and say it? You know what I mean? Like, I knew when you were listening to like Terry Southern, tell his like long, boring fucking drunken story, that it was terrible. Like, you knew it. But
oh my God. Yeah.
But part of you was like, oh, but he's an older guy and he wrote all these books, and like, I'm here in this world. I'm so lucky. It's like, so I feel confused about that. That's something, I mean, that's been a real gift. I think this whole Me Too and everything is to really be like, take a look at the world that I was like socialized in, and the world I was the world I felt, for better or worse, like I felt I had to accommodate myself to, and think about where that was true, what that world really was, how did I sort of contort myself to fit into that world, Those are things I've been thinking of. I think about those things a lot, actually.
I mean, that's why I started the podcast. It was 100% because of that, And we didn't, first of all, we didn't have the words for it, and we didn't have the podium for it. I remember, being like 17 in college or 16, and like my mentor slept with the best looking girls, every season, every semester he would like write poems to them about their beauty, and that would like make them feel empowered. He was 1,000 years old already. He had started teaching there before I was born. And, but, on the record, for the record, he's still there now. So, but I knew it was wrong. I wouldn't, I didn't do it, but but that doesn't mean, I participated in this kind of like dichotomy where my body, my mind like objectified my own body. And so, this idea, we were so forced to be in the masculine world, that like I felt that I had to, my body was used by my mind in all kinds of like experimental social experiments, I was not integrated.
Yeah, I know. No, me too.
Oh yeah.
Being accommodating in like different ways and going with the idea that these older white male writers were the best writers in the world, and like their world was the most exciting.
Yeah, and we had to learn from them. And I mean, Gertrude Stein was dead, and like who else? Kathy, I met, loved, got a quote from her, but like she fell apart quickly after, Kathy Acker. I mean, like there weren't that many women who were like the type of writer I was looking to mentor with, and there were, plenty of men, and they all exemplified like what we're talking about, which is taking advantage of the perks of having like free sex around. So it was one of the first like kind of backlashes of the 60s is that our freedom of choice was mistaken by us ourselves as kind of like our freedom to give our body around, pass our body around for like attention or a favor, or intellectual help.
I agree with that. I think we thought that we were free, but, and also it was a time where feminism was being really debased, like the late 80s and the 90s, like.
Radical feminism was like,
Right. It was complicated. I've been thinking, but I felt so happy when everything started to move a little bit, because I was like, I never ever thought it would happen. I've had I actually had to leave a job because I was sexually harassed, and I never in a million years thought that like the dean would call me up and say, come in and tell your story. You know what I mean? Like it just never occurred to me, so I was really thrilled to see still so much more has to be done, but I was really
so much more.
I mean, my daughter will not take any shit like that.
No, it would be unthinkable, but they are the daughters of feminists, so I don't know if they're representative of their generation. I think
she would never, she doesn't do anything to accommodate. She does not one thing to accommodate like male desire. I mean, really, frankly.
Mine too. But she has many friends. She has many friends who do. So I don't think that she.
Well, no, I'm sure that's true. But she dresses the way it's stylish, but the way she wants.
Same.
And when you hear when somebody says something or she hears a story, she's horrified. And she's really concerned now with her career. I'm just like, go. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. It's interesting to see that like she doesn't feel like she needs to kiss up to any man to get her career
right. But
I didn't feel like I had to.
Well, I think that again, I don't know the right, I don't want to say mistake. I see it as a mistake, but I understand that it's a natural part of the process of evolution. But feminism kind of like encouraged us to adapt the system of value of transaction that was already happening in patriarchy.
Right.
So in patriarchy, a woman's greatest asset is this, right? It's your boobs and your ass and your reproductive possibility. And whether or not we were living it out, we were still like playing the part. So we had changed like the laws, but we were still acting in those ways. This is what so it was like supposed to be empowering, that you got the attention of like powerful men whose attention you wouldn't get without like your bodily assets, and this confusion of like, sexual exchange for transactional, enrichment goes on. And I think that's like at the heart of the issue with, with being a modern feminist woman in the world of patriarchy, because it's about the financial value, the transaction. So that's what we need to change, and that's the hardest thing to change, because
it's really hard.
3,000 families are in charge of 80% of the wealth, so of the most wealthy nation on earth. Well, this is a nice, I think, natural place of closure.
Okay, good.
Because it's positive and empowering, and
good.
Yeah. So thank you so much for
for
your time and your generosity. And the book again is Flash Count Diary, and this is my friend Darcey Steinke.
It's just out in paperback, so you can get it.
That's great. And everyone out there, until next week, thank you for listening, and keep speaking sex. Another piece of good news from our sponsor, oldplayground.net. They have a special right now where you can join for 3 days for $3.99. You can start a profile and you can navigate the site. It's the biggest, most inclusive, most contemporary lifestyle website, in English at least, that we know of. And you can have your own exclusive content. There is a big wall with videos, information, podcasts about sex and intimacy topics, and all kinds of open people with whom you can communicate across the country. So give it a try. This is the chance to do so. And love you all. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.